Okay, looks like we've got quite a few people logged in now, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the topic today. Why caregiver applicants don't remember applying to your jobs. It is such a frustrating problem for so many agencies that I talk to these days. So that's what I'm going to share some data on that we have collected at Augusta and some of the reasons that we found that this is happening and some recommendations for what you can do about it. So I hope this is helpful to everybody out there. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. So you've probably all been on a Zoom in the last few years, but just in case, there's the Q&A tool on the Zoom bar there that you should be able to chat in questions. And I will get to those as soon as I see them. So I'll try and answer them throughout the presentation and conversation. And we are recording this. So if you have somebody on your team who's not going to get a chance to be here today, we'll post it on our website and email it out to anybody who was registered for the webinar. So that way you can share it with whoever you think makes sense. Also, please do ask questions throughout. I hope this is a conversation and you all get the opportunity to learn from each other as well as from the data that Augusta has collected. So I definitely encourage questions. Okay, so just a minute on my background and kind of where we're coming from as a team here at Augusta. So I'm Jen. I'm one of the co-founders of Augusta. I have two other co-founders, Yvonne and Sam. I actually started in this industry as a professional caregiver working in a memory care community. So a little bit different than a lot of people's stories. I think most people in this industry, which is awesome, have a story about a family member that needed care, and that's kind of what started their trajectory into this. For me, it was actually working in a memory care community and personally and painfully experiencing the problem of understaffing, having a coworker call out at the last minute and pulling a double multiple times a week. It is just an incredibly painful experience for the other caregivers, for the clients or residents, for the business ultimately is what it impacts is your ability to care for the client and the family the way that you want to. So I am extremely empathetic to this issue, especially having basically been in this industry my entire career. So after being a professional caregiver, I worked for a couple different online caregiver training companies, which is actually how I met my now business partners. Um, the other things to know about me is I love my dog, Tina. Hopefully she doesn't make an appearance today, but if she does, she's very sweet. And I love playing music. So just as a little on a personal note. Okay, so I'm going to start with hopefully a little comedy here to lighten up the subject because it is a really frustrating problem that you get a lot of applicants and so many of them just don't seem serious. They don't, when they don't remember your job, it has this feeling that they're not actually serious about working with you, which is totally understandable. So why is this happening? Well, if if you recognize this, I said it's complicated, the relationship status. Like if you are still a Facebook user or remember when that first came out, I always thought that was really funny. But that is the real like meat behind this problem is that it is actually kind of complicated. And that's why a lot of times I think most home care agencies don't even think there's a solution to it because it's hard to pin down why it's happening. So I hope to share at least a couple of the reasons why and some recommendations, as I mentioned. But it is a little bit challenging because, like I said, a lot of people don't even think that there's a solution to these problems. So what I need to hopefully in a good way, in a healthy way, challenge you to think about is what's the applicant's experience as they actually apply to your jobs today? And how do you decide if an applicant is actually qualified? Those are two, they seem perhaps unrelated at first, but I'm going to show you exactly what the interplay is between those two different things. So I want to start with just a little bit of background on where the applicants are, right? Because that kind of sets the stage for what are the reasons and the times when they don't remember applying to your jobs. So there is some good data on this, on where applicants are coming from within all industries and within the senior care industry. As you can see, the vast majority of applicants start their job search on a job board. Indeed is certainly the most common these days, but there's a bunch of them. And ultimately, people are getting hired the most from job boards. After that, you can see social media sites. Word of mouth, we know, are awesome in the home care industry. A lot of home care agencies cite their best employees coming from referrals from other employees. Google searches and industry-specific job boards, they happen, but it's actually quite low in comparison to the major job boards out there. So yeah, that's just where the applicants are coming from today. Some of you may be familiar with that already. But it's important to know when we think about, so if half the applicants today are starting on a site like Indeed, what is their experience on Indeed and how can you be differentiated in that process? So for better or for worse, I don't know if anybody here has signed up recently as a caregiver on Indeed, but and like created a fake profile as if you were a caregiver. We do those types of things because at Augusta, we're a bit nerdy about caregivers and what they're going through. But unfortunately today, this is what a caregiver sees. So my business partner, Sam, he signed up with like a fake profile as if you were a caregiver on Indeed. And what happens is basically Indeed starts to spam the candidates with job offers. So this is a real picture of Sam's inbox after signing up on Indeed as if he were a caregiver and applying to like one job. 20 emails all at the exact same time. You can see the timestamp on the emails there. There's no way that a caregiver is going to read 20 job descriptions. They're just not going to. Like, I wouldn't either, right? So what happens is the caregivers start to apply for the wrong jobs because they get all these emails and text messages and they're not differentiating between the different companies. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense on the side of the job board, right? Like their only incentive is to send you more applicants, not to send you any of the right applicants. Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Craigslist, whatever, any job board, their whole business model is to get you to pay per click or pay per applicant. So they have literally no reason at all to care about the quality of applicants they send you. So they're going to do everything in their power to make it incredibly easy for caregivers and any other applicants to just keep applying. So it's not the caregiver's fault necessarily. They're getting spammed, and the job boards are making it too easy for them to just spam you back, basically, with a whole bunch of applications that really where they were never qualified for the job that they applied for a variety of different reasons. For better or for worse, unfortunately, the same thing is happening via text message today. So this is my partner, Sam, again. He has signed up for a whole bunch of different like services and things to see, again, what are the things that caregivers are experiencing as they apply. So there's a whole bunch of services out there where basically they, once they get your contact information, they just like start like kind of asking you to apply over and over again. Or if you started the application but didn't finish, they'll just keep messaging you over and over and over. And there's two problems with that. First is that it's not at all differentiated, right? Like they're already getting spammed by the job boards, and the texts that they get are starting to look like spam to them as well. And you can see even worse on several of these pictures here. My partner Sam, his phone was actually picking the messages up as spam. So it literally on his phone says, "Why does this look like spam? Do you want it to not be spam?" So they have to opt in to the messages at some point to say, "Yeah, okay, I guess I'll let these people start keep sending me messages about this job that I don't really remember." They all look the same, right? Like there's no way for a caregiver really to tell the difference. And if anybody out there is at all literate in terms of like phishing schemes and things like that, that a lot of people get subjected to, where somebody's trying to steal your identity or things like that. When I see these links, I gotta admit, I probably wouldn't click on it. You know, like if it was me, knowing only just a little bit about like how scams work, I probably would think this is not a safe link to click, especially when my phone or phone carrier already pops up with a message that says this might be spam. So this is just like on top of it all, they're getting all these spam emails. They're getting text messages that look like spam. It's not incentivizing caregivers to apply to the right jobs or continue on in your application process to actually get to the point of an interview. Usually in most hiring funnels, we see a massive drop off when caregivers are asked to like do multiple steps before a interview. And that just creates the like confusion, drop off in your hiring process, inefficiency, whole bunch of stuff. So the recap here, and one of the big reasons why caregivers don't remember applying to your jobs is that the job boards are only incentivized to give you more applicants, not to help you find any of the good ones. And they enable caregivers applying to the wrong jobs. And same with the text that they get. It's they get too many and they just keep applying. So that kind of leads to the question then, if you're getting all these spam, if you're getting all these applicants that kind of apply to your jobs inappropriately, I guess, like they live too far away, they don't have the right experience level, whatever it may be, that factor that they just randomly applied for your job, then on your side of the equation, how do you know who is actually a qualified applicant? It's an incredibly difficult problem to solve, right? Like you probably, out of all the applicants you get, maybe half of them actually meet the requirements of the job that you're hoping to fill right now, or the shift that you're hoping to fill. So that's my other challenge to you, is to use this information about what the experience is of an applicant and think about, okay, what do I need to do differently as I qualify candidates? If you just joined, I just want to give you a heads up. Feel free to use the Q&A tool in the Zoom to ask any questions that you might have. Okay, so who is a qualified candidate? I don't know if anybody's read this book, but it is absolutely one of the best books that I've read on hiring process and how to systematically determine whether or not candidates are qualified. So the Who book is they studied hiring from about 300 different companies, 300 different CEOs. They did 1,300 hours of interviews. So they got a huge amount of data, not only quantitative, but also qualitative for any data nerds out there. Basically what they found, there's a whole bunch of great stuff in this book, by the way. If anybody needs, they have some really wonderful tools to help define your interview and like what exactly you want to get out of a first and second and third interview, depending on how many rounds you do. So that's just a side note. But the thing that's really related to what we're talking about today is that about half of the companies that this author studied, made the wrong hiring decisions. And the reason that they determined this is happening is because most hiring managers rely on their gut instincts when they make that hiring decision or moving people through the hiring process. And I got to admit, when I first started reading this, I was like, I don't feel like I use my gut instincts. I've hired a lot of salespeople in my career. But then after I thought about it, I realized I totally have been victim to this myself. And I think everybody has at some point, because when you see an application that looks well written and filled out completely, or you see a resume that looks like just really tidy and neat, or you have that first conversation with somebody on the phone and think, wow, this person is really articulate and thoughtful, that biases your opinion, for better or for worse, it does. And you end up making gut instinct decisions about whether or not this person should continue into the process. So, what this book recommends after all the data that they studied is basically developing a systematic strategy for what you ask, when you ask it, and why you're asking it. All of that is crucial, basically, to have a true plan and strategy for exactly how your interview process is going to go and what you're going to get out of it. Part of what they also recommend, which I think is an absolutely key strategy, and they laid it out very well in the book as well, is making sure that you ask the same questions to candidates multiple times in different ways. And the reason that's important is because just like if you go to the doctor's office, right? The doctor is going to ask you a ton of questions. You say, I have a pain in my knee, and then the doctor's going to ask you a ton of questions. And they're probably going to ask some of the same questions like multiple times, especially if you end up seeing two different, a doctor and then a specialist, maybe. They're going to go back over the same information to make sure they understand the problem fully, right? It's a very similar idea with how they recommend interviewing somebody. When you get information up front, your first questions are going to be verifying that information. And then the second questions also kind of tracking back to how that fits into what they want and what you want out of them becoming an employee. So asking the same questions multiple times in different ways is an essential part of their process to systematically qualify or disqualify candidates. So that way, their real answers. You're not just going on gut instincts, you're going on what their actual experience is and whether or not they're consistent, which helps point to their reliability as an applicant. Okay, so just a quick exercise here. You don't have to do anything crazy. Maybe just make a mental note, or if you have a piece of paper, feel free to jot down some ideas. So I just wanted you to think for a second about how long do you look at a resume or an application before deciding whether or not they're qualified enough for you to reach out to and to chase, basically, because we know that a lot of times today in the hiring environment, you get a ton of applications and you might be chasing everybody, adding to the spam problem. But I just want you to think for a second, how long do you actually take to look at that resume or application before making that decision? Am I going to reach out to this person? So just feel free to write down your answer or just think about it for a second. My other question for you is, how fast do you get that gut feeling when you look at that resume or application about whether or not this candidate is going to be somebody that you want to interview? So just that gut feeling, how fast does it happen for you? Especially in that first interview as well. When you look at that resume or when you get to that first interview, somebody shows up looking very put together or looking kind of disheveled. Like, how fast does that affect your opinion of them and whether or not you want to make that hiring decision for them? So just think about that for a second while I share some more data with you. So on average, an employer looks at a resume for 6 to 7 seconds. So it's barely enough time to really understand anything about this candidate. Like, you're probably, most hiring managers in this industry, I think they scan for anything that looks like caregiver, anything that looks like um, uh, even just something that's remotely related to this industry. And oftentimes, especially with the amount of inquiries that home care agencies usually get, sometimes you have no information at all and you just have to call them because you get a name, email, phone number, right? So it's almost, once you get a resume, you're like, oh, how much time do I even spend on this? Because all I'm looking for is something that's related to caregiving or points in that direction, at least. At least they're not a truck driver, like one of those types of things. So it's a very short amount of time that people are actually spending looking at applications. In addition, most hiring professionals say that they make their hiring decisions within the first 5 minutes of an interview. So it is very much based on that initial reaction to how somebody looks and talks and presents themselves to you. And that's just for better or worse. Like I said, I've been victim to it as well in my own hiring process, where I've seen, I know I've made the wrong decision based on just how somebody talked, and I thought that they would be a great, person who could really connect with people in a sales way. Um, and then later I find out they really didn't have quite as much experience as I thought that they did, or the skills that I thought that they did, because I didn't ask the same questions multiple times to make sure that they had consistent answers and also showed more depth in the interview process as they went along. And then lastly, there is not a lot of evidence at all, unfortunately, in data that's out there that hiring decisions made on those first impressions are effective at all. And what's really interesting from this study, which I put the links down the bottom here so you can check these out in more detail later, but about 1/3 of new hires quit within the first 6 months across multiple industries. So obviously in home care, we know we've got a turnover problem, and there's a lot of different reasons why that's happening. I'm not going to go into all that today because it's a big problem. Probably mostly related to how hard this work is. But this study was across a whole bunch of different industries. So there's perhaps a bigger problem with turnover in home care than other industries, but it's also true across the board, which really points back to the hiring decisions that are being made and whether or not there's a real fit between the job and the person being hired for it. So I'm going to pause for just a second. I think I saw somebody raise their hand, and I'm not sure if that was an accident, and now I missed who it was. If you raised your hand and you have a question, please either do it again or chat in or use the Q&A to ask a question. I'm happy to answer anything that may be on your mind. Okay, so getting to the idea of how do you start to systematically qualify candidates. Augusta, I'm going to explain a little bit about what we do, but a big part of it is what we've done is started to collect a lot of data on what applicants are, how they apply to jobs, where they apply to jobs, what they want to get out of them, and a whole bunch of different really helpful information for you to know about whether or not the candidates in general in the market are qualified at all, basically. So I'm going to dig into this here. So our software, what it does is it motivates candidates to actually show up to interviews based on how qualified they are when they complete a set of 16 home care specific screening criteria. So we only work with home care agencies. So all of the data that I'm going to show you is entirely home care and caregiver specific. The software that we created, it also geolocates candidates through their browser data and their zip code in proximity to where your clients live and to where your agency office is. So our software, it does both, which is important, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So far this year, we've processed about 30,000 applicants, and 95% of all 30,000 applicants have completed all of the screening criteria that we've asked them, which is very unusual. And if you want to see a demo of our software, I can tell you about how we do that. But the reason I mentioned the size of the sample is because it is, if you're a data nerd, it is statistically significant, right? So everything I share in terms of the percentages of what caregivers are asking and thinking about in the application process, it's meaningful data. Where the applicants are coming from in our software is that our customers actually connect our app to everywhere that they market for caregivers. So our customers use it in paper marketing when they go to job fairs with a QR code, job boards like Indeed, Craigslist. They do social media recruiting ads, their own websites. Basically, they connect our app to essentially anywhere they're applying for jobs. So what that means in terms of the data that I'm going to share with you just now is that the applicants that we're looking at are coming from a wide swath of sources. So it's 30,000 applicants that have gone through this process, and from everywhere on the internet and in person and on everybody's website, right? So like it's a ton of different data sources. So it's what's helpful about it is that it's a cross section of what's happening across caregiver applicants pretty much across the US, essentially. Okay, so one of the things that's really important to think about and why caregivers don't remember applying to your jobs is because, as I mentioned, they're getting spammed. We know this. They are enabled to apply to the wrong jobs. And so as a result of that, what's happening is that more than half, 52% of applicants end up applying to jobs or to an agency that is more than 15 miles away from where they live. So if you are in a urban area, then 15 miles is too far. If you're in a city like LA or New York or anywhere that's an urban area, they're not going to ultimately be able to travel 15 miles to get to their client or to your agency on a regular basis. Obviously, we know that they don't have to come into the agency with very frequently, but certainly to the client. So only 48% of applicants actually live within 15 miles of the agency they applied for. This means that already the applicants that you're getting, at least half of them are not qualified, just at a base level. So when you think about spending all that time reaching out to people who were never going to be qualified for your job, you need a way to systematically get them out of the process. The job boards are going to keep spamming people, right? So you need a way to not only break the cycle of what's happening there, but also just like get the unqualified candidates out of your way for the meantime. And then ultimately, caregivers that were hired live 78% of them live within 15 miles of the job. So you're already having to disqualify a ton of people, and then almost all the time, the people that you're hiring are going to live very close to where the job is, which totally makes sense, right? But like up front or have a way to get it out of caregivers up front, then you're, basically wasting a ton of energy and time on candidates who don't seem serious. Okay, so out of all these applicants, since we know so many of them have applied to your job erroneously, you're getting a ton of people who are new to the industry. So there's as you can see, 51% of applicants out of this 30,000 person data set are brand new to the industry. Only 49% have some experience in the industry. So, in the way that you market your jobs, that you need to be really upfront that you do have a way to work with new caregivers to the industry. So it's important to think about how you remarket to candidates as well. and make sure that they understand that your training program is really supportive. You have a mentorship program. You have, all these different things in place. Um, the other thing about it is that most caregiver applicants don't usually tell you on a resume or an application whether or not they've done something like cared for friends and family. That just doesn't typically happen. So getting that information up front from candidates helps you understand whether or not they're actually qualified for your job. Um, So very relatedly, if you happen to be in one of the states like California or a whole bunch of the other states that require some sort of registration, certification, licensure as a caregiver, unfortunately, you're going to find that only 32% of applicants have any sort of registration at all that's related to our industry. So the vast majority of people are not registered with the state in a way that they need to in those states where you need to. So the reason I mention this is because when you're thinking about who's qualified or not, um, knowing ahead of time that you're probably going to need to invest some energy, whether it's money or time, some sort of energy into helping people understand what the registration process is, if you have one, and how you're going to be able to help them with it. Um, so that's just a note on, again, who's qualified for your job. Finally, or actually almost finally, one of the things that our software is able to help you uncover is what benefit is most important to caregivers. So that way you can actually sell them on the job and make sure that they understand what's different in that first phone interview. The vast majority of applicants are still asking for flexible hours. We've seen this, I think, in a few different studies related to our industry, but that is for sure the number one thing that applicants are still asking for. After that, it's overtime pay, which totally makes sense based on the other things we know about this. So being very differentiated about how you explain your flexible hours to candidates is super important, not only in the job ad, but in the actual application process, making sure they understand those things because they're looking at too many jobs, right? So you need to be differentiated about how you explain these things to them. And make sure that they know they're available. Saying it to them multiple times is really important. And of course, if you don't offer some of these benefits, that's good data for you to know and things to think about for the business. Um, also, one of the things we're collecting in our software is when caregivers are actually available to work. So I think we've all experienced this when we talk to applicants, but we know that for sure that the vast majority of applicants can't work some combination of weekend days. So there are about 46% that say that they can work all days and only 10% that say I can just work weekdays. So it's really important to explain to people ahead of time what in your job ad and in your application process and throughout your entire onboarding and hiring experience, what your plan is for incentivizing things, incentivizing shifts that are difficult to fill. So do you have some sort of pay or advancement system that's related to pitching in on the weekends, and giving them a heads up ahead of time that those things may happen, that they may pitch in on the weekend, and making sure that they're appropriately compensated for that in some way. Okay, so that was a ton of information, right? So the recommendations that we have based on all the data that we've collected, I've got them up on the screen here. Happy to share the slides as well for you in case you're taking notes. But the first thing to think about is we know they're getting spammed. It's spammed via text, spammed via email. They're probably getting calls that sound like spam as well. So you need to think really deeply about how you market to caregivers and how you remarket to them, right? So a lot of systems out there may just be continuing to blast out all your jobs to your entire database of applicants. And I cannot recommend enough that you figure out how to stop doing that. Augusta does have a solution, but there's probably others. I mean, but it's really important not to keep spamming your applicants. You need to be really strategic about when you reach out to them and who you reach out to. If you keep sending emails and text to your entire database, they're going to get tired of hearing from you. They're already tired of hearing from people. And it's encouraging the cycle to keep happening of just they keep applying to the wrong jobs because they don't read because they get too many. So it's a very difficult problem, but if when you can break that cycle and only reach out to the right people at the right time and make sure that they understand as they apply to your job that you're the right fit, that makes a world of difference. The other thing is that since job boards have made it so easy to apply, you need to think about any other friction that you're adding to the process, right? So if I'm applying to 16 jobs at one time, and I get to your job and I find a 3-page long application before I talk to anybody, I'm not going to keep applying. Honestly, I've got 10 other jobs I could apply for. So you really need to think about any friction that's in your hiring process. So if what usually happens is that a candidate thinks that they applied for your job when they hit one-click apply on the job board. And then most of the time they're greeted, I guess sarcastically greeted, with a second application, right? So making sure that that process is super smooth, that you don't ask them the same questions in before they get to that phone screen, right? Like they need to feel like it's organized and simple, and they understand why they should keep working with you, all without having to like jump through hoops, right? Because they already have this easy experience on job boards. You don't want to make it harder for them. Otherwise, they're just going to drop out and apply to all these other jobs. Third on the list here, qualifying and disqualifying applicants in a data-driven way. Since there's too many of the wrong applicants, you really need to think deeply about who is qualified for your job and how you're going to rule people out of the process because there's too much bias because you're getting too many applications from the wrong people. And again, it's not your fault. It's not the caregiver's fault. It's just the nature of the environment right now. So you really need to think deeply about who you're chasing and how much time you're spending putting into chasing applicants that were probably never going to be worth it in the long run. Next, since we know that there's such a big problem with caregivers applying to jobs that are too far away from them, it's really important to help caregivers understand that you have clients near them, that not they're just they might be close to the agency, but that doesn't really matter, right? You need to help them understand in a really differentiated way that you actually have a client that you can match them quickly who lives near their a specific part of your service area. A lot of times what happens is that a applicant sees where your agency location is and thinks that you don't necessarily have clients that live near them. So breaking that cycle is really important. As I mentioned, giving support to brand new caregivers is kind of paramount now. Like there's really no other option. There's just not enough people who are experienced in this industry. So knowing ahead of time whether or not they've cared for friends and family, have some experience that's related to the industry, making sure you make it really clear about how you're going to support them getting started in this new industry. And then lastly, I think a lot of people are already doing this, but just as a reminder, having some sort of plan to incentivize difficult to fill in shifts because it's across the board. There's just not enough people who are able and willing to work on weekends, and they want flexible hours, right? So having some pay or incentive structure that helps make it really clear that you are incentivizing those difficult to fill shifts. So those are all the recommendations that we have. Like I said, I'll send this out. I hope that was helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to chat them in the Q&A or send me a note afterwards. Give me a call. If you want to stick around for 5 more minutes, I've got a little bit more information on Augusta and what we do. And if you don't have time for that right now, what I'm going to do is launch a quick poll so that way you can just let me know if you want to get more information, and I can reach out to you afterwards if you don't have another 5 minutes. So feel free to click on that poll question, and I'll just keep going while people fill out the poll. So what our recruiting software does is it motivates the right applicants to show up to interviews. As I already mentioned, totally built for home care, right? We don't work with any other industries. And when I say the right applicants, these are the people who meet those requirements that you want. They live in the right location. They have the right schedule. They meet your pay and benefits needs. That's what the right applicant is. You need to take a holistic approach in home care to thinking about who the right caregivers are. It's not just whether or not they meet your pay and benefits. It's also whether or not they've got that attitude, culture, fit, all the different things that make up a great match. And there's some of that we can do with software, and some of that that's just a personal part of our industry, right? That you just have to do in a person-to-person way, right? But what our software can do is basically get those base requirements filled out for you, so that way you can double check their answers. You can have a really strong, thoughtful conversation about how they're going to work with you in the long term and whether or not they're good culture fit at the same time. Our customers are only home care agencies. We work with a bunch of franchises. We work with a bunch of independently owned and operated agencies. We integrate with a ton of other technology. If you don't see something on here, ask me about it. But we've developed a whole bunch of integrations because we know nobody wants to have to learn multiple systems and deal with all that manual data entry. So I've already talked a lot about the problem, right? It's this vicious cycle between the job boards and the spam that the applicants are getting and not knowing what the right jobs are for them. So how do you break that cycle? What Augusta does is we stop candidates from being able to one-click apply on your jobs, and we motivate those right candidates, the one who lives in the right area, that has the right experience level, et cetera. We motivate those candidates with the right messaging as they apply to your job. So we pull them out of the process, right? They don't need to keep applying to other jobs because we told them literally as they thought they were filling out an application for employment, but it starts to pop up with little messages that tells them why this is going to be a good fit and why they should be confident that they could actually get hired by your agency. Because when I get 20 job offers, I'm not I mean, I'm not confident any of these people could hire me right away. Why am I getting spammed, right? So you need to give them confidence that they could actually get hired, that it's going to be a good fit for them for one of a few different reasons. They don't have to wait for a call, text, or email. So we tell them on the spot if they're qualified or not for at least an interview. We don't tell them they're getting the job, of course, but if they're qualified and they're a good fit, then they can either schedule a phone or in-person interview immediately based on whether or not you think that they're a great like unicorn candidate or kind of a maybe candidate. We can send those people directly to a phone screen versus your best candidates going to an in-person interview immediately. So I just want to give you a super fast example, and I'm not going to go through a whole demo. I just want to give you one example of how we're breaking that cycle and what the personalized messaging looks like. So when our customers use our software, as I mentioned, they use it on all different sources, right? In paper materials, on job boards, on their websites, wherever you're marketing. But basically, we just connect our software to your job ads, wherever they are. So this is an example of a fake Indeed posting that we made, but that's how the caregivers actually get into our software when they click the apply button. So I'm not going to fill out this whole thing. The one thing I want to focus on right now, because we know it's such a big problem for our industry, 52% of applicants are applying to jobs that are too far away from them. Like we just know base case, most applicants do not apply to jobs that they could travel to easily. So it's one of the most important and basic factors that you need to solve to be able to qualify people systematically and make sure that you're getting the right candidates into the bottom of your hiring funnel and talking to them on the phone at very least. So what our software does for the applicant, like I said, they think they're applying to your job. They think they're just going through a job application. They don't realize anything else is about to happen until they get to the end of the process and some points in the middle here. So when we ask for their zip code, and they put in a zip code that is close to your actual physical office location, what we're going to do is give them a little message that says, hey, this is going to be a short drive. And what we're trying to do here is, in this specific use case, is make sure that they show up to that in-person interview. So this is going to be a great candidate because they live close to your office and we can get them to show up to the in-person interview very likely just by letting them know. That is really easy for them to get to. And they didn't have to go read a long job description to figure out that information because we know they're not going to read job descriptions. So for instance, I'll give you another example here. So again, related to that zip code is too far away. All right. So in this case, the caregiver lives a 5-minute drive away from the agency. So we're still going to be motivating them to show up in person. On the other hand, if they live too far away from your actual physical agency location, we're not going to show them a message that it's a short drive because we know those applicants are probably ones that you should phone interview first before you think about bringing them into the in-person interview, because all you want them to know at that point is that you have clients in their service area. You don't really want to I guess make it super clear that your office is really far away from where you have clients, right? You just want to make sure that they know the service area, that you have clients in these specific locations, and it doesn't really matter where the office is. So you can get to that later in the phone screen where you can basically educate them that, hey, I've got a client in this example here. I've got a client in Pasadena who I think could be a great fit for you, like based on the skills and experience that we've talked about that you have. But our office is, I don't know, in Culver City, right? And we're going to need you to just come into the office twice for training and orientation. And then after that, your commute's going to be so easy. So that is an example of how our software helps break the cycle, right? Because they're learning it as they apply to the job, which is very different than having to read 20 job descriptions, because we know they won't, and then getting a ton of texts and emails afterwards saying, hey, you could have been a good fit, right? Because at that point, you probably already lost them to another job. The other thing that's really important about that zip code is that on your Augusta dashboard, we're going to help you localize those candidates to the service area. So we're telling the candidate you're close to the office, but on the management side, we're going to tell you and your recruiting team that this caregiver is actually close to one of your service areas. So in this case, Anna Ramirez, she's a qualified candidate. And she's within 9 miles of one of this agency's 2 major service areas, because he has 2 basically radiuses radii that he's looking for candidates in. And then last but not least, when you're building this database with all this great data of where people live, their experience level, their schedule, all the things that our software collects, it allows you to remarket to candidates strategically without spamming your whole list, which, like I said, those days are unfortunately over, right? You can't just email your entire database of previous caregivers or applicants to see if they want the job that you have right now. What our software does is gives you the ability to reach out to candidates really strategically in a super differentiated way. So the email that they're going to get through this campaign that you create right now, which is what this does. Basically, it lets you create a marketing campaign to people who match or have matched specific criteria in the past. It's going to send a super differentiated email with a nice picture of your team, very graphically designed, looks entirely different from the same emails that they get over and over and over again from the job boards and the spam text messages that they get. So that's this tool that basically uses that zip code and in a few different ways to make sure that you stop that cycle, right? You don't spam them. You tell them it's a short drive to the in-person interview when it is, and you phone interview them when it's not close to the in-person interview. So all those 3 things help you break that cycle and stop yourself from spamming candidates, stop the candidates from getting spam, and break that cycle. So that's all I wanted to share today. Thanks so much for sticking around. Feel free to keep answering the poll question. If you do want more information, feel free to reach out to me if you are interested in either doing a demo or signing up with us to stop the spam. So I'll just leave my info up on the screen here, and then I will wish you all just like a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much for watching the webinar and sticking around to the end. Really hope it was helpful. Love your feedback, love your comments. There will be a survey at the end in case you want to give me any feedback. So thanks so much, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful day.